We're now in part 3 of Saladin and the Third Crusade. The Third Crusade. I'm looking forward to finally seeing Richard the Lionheart. Richard the Lionheart and Saladin were known to be, like, you know, rivals, and I really like to see more of that, at least told by extra history, you know?
Of Acre, September 1189. The force of 8,000 Christians stands before the defensive walls, dug in between the port city and the shore. Among them flies the banner of Guy de Lusignan, the dispossessed king of Jerusalem, and until recently, Saladin's captive. Saladin could destroy them now, and perhaps he should. Acre's garrison forces were larger than the besieging army, and Saladin's troops lay in wait. But he had also heard that the army of Frederick Barbarossa, king of the Holy Roman Empire, plans to march into Syria via Turkey, so he can't afford to pin himself down or reduce his dwindling forces. Then he sees dots on the horizon. Ships. All along the sea. Reinforcements from France, Germany, and Italy. He attacks, but the window for an easy victory has been lost. And the struggle for Acre will be one of the bloodiest engagements of Saladin's career, and the opening battle of the Third Crusade. Though the capture of Jerusalem was Saladin's most triumphant moment, it also marked the pinnacle of his power and influence. For years, he had advocated that the full powers of the Islamic world be placed into his hands, with leaders setting aside disagreements over religion, politics, and ethnicity in order to retake Jerusalem. But now that that objective had been achieved, that unifying sense of jihad began to fracture. Old rivalries and differences re-emerged, along with a new concern that Saladin and his Ayyubid dynasty was becoming a bit too powerful. Troops began trickling back to their original rulers, with many never coming back. And just as this Islamic coalition began to splinter, Europe united under a new crusade. In the near century since the First Crusade, support for crusading efforts had ebbed and flowed. European kings might send money, but they only rallied to go to the Holy Land personally during times of obvious crisis. And the disaster at Hattin, the loss of the true cross, and the capture of Jerusalem was one heck of a big rallying cry. This crusade, however, was different than previous ones. The recruitment message was much more coordinated via the church, the goals more clear. In fact, a new vernacular developed around the effort. While participants in previous efforts had termed themselves pilgrims, now the act of joining was increasingly called taking the cross, a term which led to the modern term crusader. And much of this effort was focused personally on Saladin. Depicted as unfathomably evil by Christian propagandists, he was referred to by preachers as the son of Satan, and depicted in illuminated manuscripts as one of the 7 heads of the dragon of the apocalypse, which is metal AF if you ask me. Plus,
Yo, that's pretty metal, yeah, are you kidding me? But, it's funny, just because we know Saladin is, like, very honorable in his conduct, even towards Christians, even when they wouldn't have been towards him. So it's just funny seeing, like, yeah, the propaganda machine just go wild and try to make him look like the worst ever, right? But I guess that's just propaganda all the time, you know?
kings going on crusade instituted a new tax to fund their military efforts, aptly named the Saladin tithe. But it's important to remember that these European leaders were no more united than Saladin's fragile alliance. In fact, of the 3 kings who joined the crusade, the only one beginning their quest relatively quickly, Frederick Barbarossa of the Holy Roman Empire, set out on his journey in April of 1189. Whereas Richard I of England and Philip II of France, by contrast, spent several years squabbling first. While Richard took the cross almost immediately, when he was still a prince, he had to settle some matters before he could leave. Namely, Richard wanted to be King of England, so he allied himself with Philip of France to fight a war against his own father, and he won. As you can imagine, Richard's family politics were a bit bonkers. Anyway,
Yeah.
Richard became king.
Yeah, we saw the Eleanor Aquitaine series. That family is a complete mess. So I'm happy we watched that first, just to know what the heck was going on with Richard, you know?
While also holding vast territories in France. But that made going on crusade a bit awkward for Richard and Philip. See, Richard's holdings in France were actually more valuable than Philip's, and each wanted to usurp the other out to rule all of France. But now, both were rallying Crusader armies next door to each other, meaning they had to agree to set out for Palestine at the exact same time, so neither of them could invade the other's territory once they were gone. So Saladin, who knew taking Jerusalem would mean fending off a crusade, had some time to prepare. But he didn't. In fact, he kinda squandered his momentum. Though, in fairness, his troops were exhausted from years of drawn-out warfare against the Crusader states, and he likely wanted to preserve his fragile alliance by taking easy victories. He swept up small fortresses and cities that he could argue into capitulating without a fight, sometimes even trading high-value captives for them. Anything to avoid costly and demoralizing sieges. But this meant that he left the city of Tyre, its defenses swelled by Christian refugees from Jerusalem and other cities, as a center of resistance and an easy place for Crusaders to disembark. Another major mistake was letting King Guy of Jerusalem go. An act so mind-bogglingly reckless, historians still
even
argue.
I'm a little shocked about that. I mean, granted, I guess there's no kingdom of Jerusalem. Wait, but then again, if the Crusaders were to fight, they could try to reinstill him. Okay, never mind. But yeah, that seems like too high of a captive to let free. I'll admit, just hearing that right now, I'm wondering what his thought process was of that. That seems a bit much, Saladin.
Argue about his motive. He may have simply felt bad for Queen Sibylla, as Saladin always had a soft spot for his rivals' families, and he did love to be generous even to the point of recklessness. In fact, his lieutenants actually used to hide money to prevent him from giving it away.
You're too kind, you're too generous, you're too honorable. You know, I imagine they're talking about that. Try to be a little more ruthless, please.
Or perhaps he thought that Guy would create discord among the other Crusaders, who were competing to replace him. Whatever the reason, he miscalculated. After a noble named Conrad, who had seized and defended Tyre after Hattin, refused Guy entrance into the city, the dispossessed king rallied a small army and put Acre to siege. And then came Saladin's worst mistake, dawdling rather than committing forces to destroy Guy, which drew the Third Crusade to his small army like a magnet. Saladin finally hit the Christian camp on October 4th of 1189, but by then, it was too late to be easy. The combined forces of the Crusader kingdoms and the foreign reinforcements numbered 30,000, and they were in high spirits. Crossbowmen savaged the Muslim front ranks, followed by a charge of men-at-arms and heavy knights. Saladin's right wing, his weakest troops, broke, and the Crusader forces stormed all the way into Saladin's camp. But there, the Crusaders broke ranks to plunder, as they seemed to always kinda do. Then Saladin hit them with force, sending them fleeing from the slaughter. Other Christians, seeing their companions routed, believed the battle lost and broke, only to then find themselves attacked by Acre's garrison that sallied out to join the battle. Then Saladin sent the enemy corpses down the river, so they'd float through the Crusader camp. It was a victory, but barely. Several of Saladin's commanders had lost their fortunes due to the Christian plundering.
Yeah, it was really more just the Crusaders, who we all know love to just plunder stuff. Byzantine Empire, but, you know, so it seems like greed, and that greed and misunderstanding is what really saved the day, not any, like, you know, decisive tactical maneuver or anything, I guess. So, yeah.
And the near defeat wrecked morale. He had not relieved Acre, and Saladin could not commit his whole military force to dislodging them, for Frederick Barbarossa would invade Syria within months. So Saladin entered the thing he desperately wanted to avoid, the grind of endless siege warfare. And with both sides controlling portions of the port, they could both endlessly reinforce by sea, the result of which was a double siege. The Christians dug in, besieging Acre, and Saladin dug in to besiege the Christian besiegers. A turducken of siege, if you will. Harassing fire from catapults peppered Acre's defenders. Crusader barges with tall siege engines rode into port as floating artillery platforms, until Saladin's own siege engines burned them down with pots of incendiary Greek fire. Both sides captured men and tortured them within view of the enemy, and the besiegers used anything, including human bodies, to fill in the defensive trenches before Acre. Whatever was thrown in, the Muslim defenders had to pull out. When the Christians did breach the wall, the garrison would sally out to fight the besiegers, while engineers in the city hastily repaired the damage. Saladin's only stroke of luck came in June of 1190, when he received word that Frederick Barbarossa had been thrown from his horse while crossing a river in Anatolia, and the German king drowned in his heavy armor, leaving his contingent leaderless and racked with disease. And while a few managed to—
Wow, what an awful way to go. I sometimes feel bad laughing when people go out like that, but the dude really was like, I'm gonna get him. Well, and he just it's so bad. I'm so sorry, but holy crap.
To arrive at Acre, they did so just in time to suffer through one of the worst winters Palestine had seen in decades. Their food so short, the Crusaders ate pack animals, and possibly even human corpses. And then, 18 months into the siege, Richard and Philip arrived, and things changed. Because they brought with them enormous catapults named... Wait, no, really? Named Bad Neighbor and God's Own Catapult. Oh, I'm loving
it. Unleash Bad Neighbor and God's Own Catapult. I love those days. Did they name it themselves? Or like, I don't know. If they did, that's hilarious. I love that.
This. So expensive were they to maintain that a priest had to stand by them during their operation, praying and asking for donations to pay for repairs when they broke down or were damaged. An equally large Muslim catapult, dubbed Bad Relative, returned fire. This was a new type of siege warfare. The previous catapults could do no more than harass and injure defenders, but these named beasts knocked great holes in the defensive walls. It was clear Acre would fall. Yet something else appeared in Saladin's camp. A diplomat secretly sent by Richard without Philip's knowledge. Richard, ill with scurvy and calling on codes of chivalric honor, asked for a gift of fruit and ice, and he suggested they meet for talks. Saladin, ever hospitable to enemies, sent the requested peaches, dates, figs, and ice, along with a message. No meeting. Not until they had a peaceful truce. For if the kings met as friends, then later fought, it would bring dishonor on both of them. And fight they would, in a battle that would stand as one of the greatest personal rivalries in all of history. And we'll tell you about that little spat next time.
Heck yeah. Awesome. I'm looking forward to that. I'm going to jump to that right now, guys. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye, everyone.